All right, so today we're pretty much just going to be going over, how we can prep for a week, a day, anything like that. Find setups, find, any trends that we're commonly seeing, anything like that. So we'll just go over, some of the basics. And first off, I want to touch on a few things that are, outside of specifically just, using flow chart. Um, Dark Pool to find setups and new tickers that you've never heard of before. But just in general, being able to hone down on, if you didn't have these tools, if you didn't have the Dark Pool stuff, if you didn't have the flow, which everyone has access to the flow in here. You all have access to that flow bot that we pay for, the Unusual Whales flow bot for the entire server. So you can all do any sort of diving in on flow you want, anything like that. But just in general, a few things that you can use outside of Unusual Whales, AnyFlow app, and Dark Pool is just looking at identifying different trends, rotations, things like that that are taking place, and I like to refer to those as regimes and regime changes. So you'll see as time goes on that there are going to be different regimes and different regime changes that occur over time that develop into these patterns for anywhere from a couple weeks to a few months. And then when it comes to some longer term stuff, there's going to be changes in different sectors that you're going to see, and different niches within different sectors. So first off, I just wanted to go over some regime change stuff and kind of what you would be looking for right off the bat with that on a longer term time horizon. So first off, we'll go over, some of you were in here last summer. I talked about a lot. I started hearing some whispers here and there, just on the internet, but it wasn't ever front and center on nuclear names. So nuclear energy, I started hearing some people talk about different things that were, shaping up to be profitable for different companies, and some whispers within, the federal government and bills that were being passed, those sorts of things. And so, to be honest, like spotting different trends and themes is not going to be that hard. You just kind of have to, have your ear to the ground a little bit with what's going on. And so last summer I was going over a lot. I actually was speaking to my cousin directly who works at Microsoft about this, and he was like, you know, no way nuclear is going to be a thing. That you missed that by, 15 years ago. Maybe they were considering it, but no one's considering it anymore, yada, yada, yada. And so I hammered in here, Anon, who's in the Discord, I'm sure can tell you about it, because that was the one thing I told him last summer. I was like, I like all the nuclear names. So here's a good example of kind of just the basic things you can do when you spend a little bit of time every day, every week, whatever it may be, kind of following up on what's happening in different sectors, different spaces, those sorts of things. So NNE here is going to be one name that I would reference as something that's interesting in the nuclear space. So I was specifically talking about this back in August a lot. I was talking about NNE here. And so we can look at that. It had sold back down, IPO'd, got that IPO pop, sold back down. And it's just chilling down here at the lows back in August. So it was trading at, $10 around that time, anywhere from 13.75 down to 6.30. So you could have gotten, cut that in half. That's going to be $6 and $7.40. So, cut that in half, 370. So you could have, average could have been $10 if you just averaged in throughout the whole month. Here we are just a year later, not even a year later, $10, 11 or 10 months, 11 months, and here we are. That's over triple from where we first started hearing those whispers, and that's simply just from looking at what's going on, what stocks people are talking about, what spaces people are talking about that are not super overhyped at the time. And like Nvidia being another one I've mentioned in here many times. Back in 2019, 2020, I was talking to my hairdresser about Nvidia a lot, and that was a stock that she put the majority of her net worth into. I did not tell her to do that. It was not financial advice, but she put the majority of her stock money at least into Nvidia, and that's because that was a trend that I saw coming early. A lot of people were talking about it. It was, something that people were talking about, but it wasn't really a huge thing. And then it matched with the other IPOs that were happening, other chip names, and that fared very well for her, because that was back in about May 2019. So it is now 40x about since then. And we can go to some other nuclear energy names as well as another example. So OKLO here. OKLO, same thing. Had you bought this in August of 2024, you would have been paying at the highest $9.15, at the lowest $5.90. So 325, cut that in half, that would be $1.62. So your average, if you had averaged in throughout the month, would be 652. 752. So yeah, you would have paid 750 if you averaged in throughout the month, or got that median price on that. And what do you know? Boom, ripper all the way up here. So we can keep our ears to the ground and just kind of see. You don't even need a lot of these fancy tools to be able to identify these different trends, different rotations, all those things that are going to take place. And Druckenmiller, Stanley Druckenmiller has a good interview where he talks about how they had entered Nvidia at a very early stage, not even early timeline wise. It was like 2017, 2018, just because they had seen, they focused on looking at what startups people were trying to start, I think they were looking at Y Combinator specifically, looking at what the people coming out of MIT and Harvard were going into for fields and what startups they were starting. So different people have different ways of identifying what I like to call regime changes and different sectors that are going to be hot. And there's a bunch of different ways of doing it, but you can kind of, as time goes on, just spend a few years thinking about it, and you can find different sectors that have not run yet. And realistically, to change the entire path of your life with longer term shares, you just need to do that a few times throughout your entire, you need 3 to 6 good bets that make you lots of money throughout the entire timeline of your life. And that's all you need to make lots and lots of money with shares as time goes on. So just wanted to touch on that at the start. And then another one that we're seeing on the longer term time horizon is going to be robotics. So this one, I was actually talking to Big B about this. I think this is about to go even nuttier soon. And I think that eventually Tesla will probably play a part of this, but Tesla is it's not some startup robotics company. It's they have a high market cap. So it's not something that I would say you're going to have some ridiculously asymmetrical risk reward with. But sure, you could make 10x off it. That would be huge. But there are going to be a lot of robotics companies that I think are going to be very important. I think that'll be one of the next phases as AI grows. So I think next will be nuclear. You'll start to see that. We already are with the push towards that from the federal government, and to be able to, grow the power capabilities of our grid. And I think nuclear is going to be the solution for that, and it already looks like it. So I think nuclear will be next, and then as AI starts to the next phase of AI is not going to be the actual software application of it. In my opinion, it's going to be, physical robotics and being able to do things that supplement or largely replace a lot of human capabilities, physical capabilities. So I think that'll be a very hot theme up next after nuclear. But I think robotics is just starting. That'll be a big thing in the future. So those are my top things for a longer term. And we can also see these things coming down to a smaller time frame. So we'll compare, this is one that I always bring up all the time. So we'll go to MSTR here. MSTR, we'll go to the daily, and then we can overlay another one here. We'll go to Mara. we'll go same percent scale. So here we have, obviously an asymmetrical move here with miners versus, MSTR, which has held the Bitcoin and has much higher leverage factor than these miners. And so you can see where they started to deviate here. And that was back in February of 2024, so a little over a year ago. We saw MSTR here get leaps and bounds ahead of Mara, and we can overlay some other miners, same thing. And that's what I would call a regime change, because at one point, if we go back to December 2022, I would say that was like the start of the next cycle. Even Mara was outperforming until we got to March of 2024 here. So Mara was an outperformer had you bought back then, and then a regime change occurred. MSTR kind of changed their business model a little bit, and we saw that meteoric rise for MSTR here, while Mara has stayed relatively flat since then. A total of 457% return, 2,600% return on MSTR from the same date. So there's a huge discrepancy there. And we can start to see these things take place in real time, and there will usually be a narrative attached to them. So, like we had the halving narrative with the miners that kind of crushed all the opportunity with miners for a very long period of time. And if you zoom out even further, you can see that they went through an even earlier regime change, basically, where that changed. So MSTR put in roughly the same pattern that it's putting in right here, actually almost exactly. And by that point, Mara was already outperforming MSTR in that 2020-2021 cycle. And so who knows, that if history tracked, that could happen here. I probably wouldn't bank on it. I don't think Bitcoin's going to head, a whole lot higher for a longer period of time before this cycle ends and it starts to sell off. But if history repeated, that's what you would look for. So on a longer, medium time frame, that's kind of what you want to look for with these regime changes, and figure out how that's working in tangent with any other instrument. And then we can also see that within other inversely correlated sectors and spaces. So we'll even go a shorter time frame here. So we'll go, we'll pull up SPY. So this was a temporary one. We'll go SPY, and then we'll take off Mara. We'll go USD, JPY. This is the Japanese yen. So there's a trade that takes place where basically it's called the carry trade. Look it up if you don't know anything about it. Basically, you borrow in the yen and use that to invest in other assets, and then you pocket the difference pretty much. So as the US dollar to Japanese yen correlation changes in how much they're worth relative to each other, that causes a lot of problems with liquidity. And so as you can see here, there is a direct correlation here with the almost direct correlation with a little bit of lag, and that starts to change. So we saw that that dip back in August right here, and that was a sharp sell-off of the yen, traced almost exactly, increasing here. Then right as we get to about here, things start to shift, and we notice that it's not directly paired, especially as we start to bottom here. The yen has barely recovered in relation to the US dollar. That's because of what's been happening with the US dollar recently. And the yen is also on its own experiencing a bit of a regime change as well. So that's what we can look for, start to figure out what those things are doing. It's not some secret. You can Google all these things, look them up, read on Twitter, X, anything like that. So that's what we look for on like a higher time frame for things that are changing. And you can even see it in relation to, let's just go DXY here. That's another one we can do, DXY. So we can see on a higher time frame that this is interesting because they are no longer, we can even zoom out even more, they are no longer paired as closely as they were before. So the S&P has gone up and out, while DXY has pretty much remained low here after a sharp sell-off that matched, and then now they've become unpaired. So you'll start to see these rotations that take place as different things pair and unpair, correlate and uncorrelate. And on a medium time frame, longer time frame, you'll see different stuff that applies. And then on a shorter time frame, you can also see different things that apply. So bonds, lately have been fairly unimportant for the past 2 months in relation to what the S&P does, but for multiple months they were very, very important in relation to. I hate this chart. They were very, very important in relation to how the S&P moved, and they were almost directly inversely correlated. And then we had a regime change, things changed, and other catalysts come into play with the S&P 500. So in general, that's how we look at stuff on higher time frame, on a medium time frame, and then you can also see it on a shorter time frame with rotations within different sectors. So, kind of like I mentioned with MARA versus MSTR, things can be, one asset can be outperforming another in the same sector, and then all of a sudden there's a regime change that occurs, or some sort of catalyst, sentiment changes, and those things change. And so even down to a, from here we can even go down to a weekly basis. So we're not going to be doing higher time frame stuff anymore. We'll go into some options stuff now, shorter dated and options stuff. So in general, we'll look to get this. We're all good. Some confluent stuff in different sectors. So I was looking to today, for example. I'll bring flow into this as well. So I was looking to gold today. So I saw flow yesterday on this gold ETF called Nugget, and this is 2x leveraged gold miner index. So I saw this flow come in yesterday for $78 calls, which was at the money. The stock the ETF got absolutely nuked today. And what do you know? Those are still open. So I'm thinking, okay, interesting. This thing doesn't really get much flow. Do I really want to take something, do I want to tail this, get something closer to the money? I don't know. There's not enough data and flow. So what I did was I popped open unusual whales here, and I basically just went down here. This is where it gets fun. Just go to sectors, and then I look to, or I'm going to go industries, sorry. I'm going to go to gold. Where are you? There you are. So we can look at everything gold related here. And obviously I want things to be shorter dated. So we'll go to 14 DTE. We'll go $1,000 premium, or we'll go $12,000 premium. And then we will go volume greater than OI, out of the money only. Well, we don't need volume greater than OI. Go here. And so we can see here, we got some other flow on some other stocks here. So this is AEM right here. And we can see that AEM has a bunch of call flow here, not at the pure ask. So if you watch the flow video, I talk about pure ask versus ask. It's a little bit sketchier when stuff's at a lower volume on a specific contract, and it's not at the exact ask price, because you can't really confirm that it's truly buy to open, because the spreads will move, especially with size on stuff that gets low volume. But I can make a guess that this is likely buy to open here. So we'll go, we want to see exactly what's been going on over a longer period of time, because volume is lower than open interest. So we can see, okay, interesting. This matches almost exactly. So this is probably, they sold it, it dipped, and they closed out. So they're closing out their sold calls, which is net bullish. And then we can see NEM here. Same thing. Volume matches open interest almost exactly. So we'll go back 3 days, go back 30 days. Okay, interesting. Those candles are going to be, probably one of them is going to be closing out this position, and then there were some more ads that took place. So it looks like ads to me, And generally it's a good thing if something nukes like this off the open, and then you start to see, instead of calls being opened here and they get rugged, it's good, usually smart money, when a stock dips a ton and calls are being, and it looks like this on the premium chart where it just dips off the open for the first couple hours, and you see people adding here at the lows. So those are usually what you want to look for on those, and be able to find, a correlation between, okay, so there's calls on all of these other gold miners, and this leveraged ETF nuked off the open because of what the dollar did today. So interesting. That means that even though I don't have a ton of data on this name specifically, I can see that there's other calls open in the same exact industry, that correlate and trade with correlation to this. So that's usually a bullish signal. Good to go. That flows a tail. So we just look for other points of confluence that give us more hints as to what we are looking for and confirming our bias that we've developed. So that's a good example for there. Let's see. Just in general, to prep overall, I'm kind of diving into stuff that recently has been this week, but I'll go into just general prep overall. So usually I'll put on, a more broad filter. So let's just say we're starting fresh here. We know nothing. I've been on a deserted island for a year, and I have no charts, nothing. I'm back home, and I'm ready to trade. I know nothing about what's going on right now. I want to look for some plays in the shorter term and see what's going on. So first off, we'll start with using flow to find stuff. So we'll go $1,000. We'll go 10,000. We're going to turn off ETFs. We're going to turn off indices, and we'll leave ADRs on for now. And then so from there, we're going to go, let's just keep it shorter dated, see if we can find anything spicy. So we'll go 5% out of the money. We'll go, keep it 20 DTE. And then we'll go, wrong column, 20 DTE. And we'll go keep the spot less than, we'll keep it less than $20 for now. Then we'll go volume greater than OI just to filter out a bunch of crap, people closing out stuff. This will be pretty broad. There's going to be a lot of stuff on here. If you look, this is just the last 15 minutes, and we have, 100 different orders here. So we'll go out of the money only. Out of the money only here. And then we'll go to opening trades. That'll reduce it even more. So this is only trades that are larger than, what's possible if it wasn't an opening trade. So we also have too many multi-legs on here, which I recommend. In general, don't even bother with multi-legs because there's a lot of credit spreads, debit spreads, iron condors. There's 100 different strategies that people will use with options for different movements. So the easiest thing to see is going to be just straight up keeping everything a single leg. So already some here that catch my eye. We're actually also going to turn off, floor trade here. We're going to turn off cross. And then we're going to keep it off of no side because those don't tell us anything. So right off the bat, we see some interesting stuff here. Even these sold to open positions are interesting to me. So first off, right off the bat, this one's interesting. GameStop, 26.5 calls. So we can come over here, pop open our chart, just see if there's anything right off the bat that looks interesting. I'd say that looks pretty interesting. Right off the bat, big gap down on the daily, and the gap starts at above 2440 here. So right off the bat, we can see, okay, this might have some merit. So GameStop here, note that one down. GameStop 26.5 Cs. Even though it's tiny size, you'll go through different trends where you'll see different size flow work out differently. Lately it's been the small stuff with good chart setups. Sometimes you'll see, go through a couple month period where you'll see a repeat pattern of it's not stuff, with a good chart setup. It's stuff with, 100K to 500K of buy to open calls, and there's just no setup on the chart, kind of neutral, but, it'll get news, it'll run. A lot of that will happen during, buyback windows, stuff like that. So you'll see different windows where different kind of flow works, and you want to tail different things. So right off the bat, we got GameStop. That's an interesting one we're going to note down. So 26.5 calls for next week. That'll be on my watch list. You could even set a level right here, 24.40. If it breaks above that, you know that it's going into that gap, which has a moderately high chance of at least being partially filled. I'm at least up to, this local support here, prior support at $26. So right off the bat, that's one thing we would look for. Pretty straightforward, easy to find. Even though that's small size, I still put some weight on it. And then if we want even more confirmation, we'll just go through it right now rather than coming back to it. We can look through what's going on with flow. So that's certainly interesting. As you can see, volume less than OI. That's the first thing I look at. So, okay, looks like they've been stacking smaller size for a longer period of time. Go back. Those all look like buy to open. They've been accumulating as it's been dipping. These could be a good opportunity here. Some solid accumulation with open interest holding over the past couple weeks. So that, definitely note that down. Bullish signal right there. We got 23.5C here. Those are going to be sold to open with volume much larger than OI. But just to check, we'll click here. We can see that it's a spread. So that is, kind of a complex multi-leg here. Might even just be a roll. Can't really tell exactly. But that will just count as a nothing burger for now, other than you might, just mark that on your chart. That's going to be, that they want to keep it down below a break into that gap. But we have some interesting, smaller size flow to go off of with that. And then we'll also look to, let's see what else we got here. We'll go, that's about the same. Too many orders. 25. Zoom out a little bit. Nah, yeah, nothing good there. 26C. That's definitely interesting, especially because we have 26.5s that we saw, but kind of matches the open interest. So as you can see, no major order. That's kind of its own order right there. Definitely a good data point. Mark that down. GameStop looks good. We can even dive further in a little bit later, but for now we'll just keep moving along, get this going. So Upstart, this is one that I saw this morning. This is not like A++, but it's like a minus of what I like to see, where with Upstart here this morning, I saw this flow come in, I waited, basically came in, got a huge pop off the open here, off the open up to 80. These weren't at the money. If they were at the money at the top, that would absolutely be a top call for the expiration date that this is, but it's not. It's out of the money, and they did not hit it at the exact top. They waited a little bit till it dropped down a little bit, so 7:05 to 7:10. We can even look at the chart Pacific time here, what we're looking at. So 7:05 to 7:10. That was I would say that's kind of a trader spot to enter, right? So that prior pre-market high here, that initial candle at the pre-market open, that would serve as your support here for a lot of people that trade opening range breakouts. So right off the bat, drop back down there. You see that move right back to that pre-market high. That's where someone could be entering right there, expecting it to bounce, but it didn't. It sold down, but they remained with that position open. It's still open. So basically we get to see that someone is expecting higher for whatever reason, and we can get a reduced entry to that. But instead of taking that 82, you can take an 80 because it's cheap. So we got a better entry on those $80 calls today, and we're expecting to see that false breakdown bounce back up. If you look up here on the higher time frame, right away we see that there's a huge imbalance here taking place from, this $80 down to this 73.90 area, 73.80. And so that daily first broke up into that imbalance there, above that 73.80 spot. We got a really nice close on that daily. And this one today, popped up, rejected off that upper level right there, and came back down. So if we did gap down tomorrow on this and sell, it would be a indicator that we're going to see further selling. So what I want to see tomorrow is a move up, back out of this gap, and then we should see some continuation up to the highs here. So right away, that's what we're looking for on that setup. So that flow could be really good. I'd expect to move up here. I threw these levels on earlier, just real quick. I'd expect to move, up here above the 80 mark. I'd expect to move up to 83.69 area, and then a bigger move up to 86.40 if possible. And so we'll be watching that closely. And I just charted those levels out just based off the wicks and bodies where there's a little bit of confluence on the daily. Nothing more, nothing less. And then I looked through the weekly as well, found some interesting stuff, and then even zoomed out a little bit more on the weekly and saw, okay, there's some serious prior resistance or prior support, now resistance up here. So that's going to be a spot that I'm going to look for, basically the bottom of this weekly candle, this 86.40. So that's the highest level. If it breaks above that, yeah, we could get a big face ripper up here to like 100, but I highly doubt that happens. So that's going to be our data point there. Pretty basic. Dug through flow, found that. Let's take a look at, D-Dog's not at the pure ask here, so this is marked at the ask. This is why I always say you got to look at the bid ask. So this is kind of mid-price, but the spread's 24 cents, and this is closer to the ask. So it might have been a sell to open, but I mean, either way, I kind of ignore these because, this has an equal volume candle matching it, so I won't pay too much attention to that. Right off the bat, those are the things that I see in that filter. And then from here, we can go a little bit more broad brush. So Lemonade, that's another one, LMND. We'll take a peek at that real quick because I haven't even looked at this flow before. I haven't seen this today. So LMND here, pop open the daily. Looks like it's flagging, consolidating, looking to break higher. 45.50, 718. So for next week, this is tiny flow, but this could play out. So from here, we'll go to LMND. Check out what's going on here. So we got solid opening flow on that, which we just looked at. And then let's check out some higher strikes. Is there anything? Let's see if there's a big wall at 50. No, there's an old position open. No, it just looks like slow accumulation. So that's kind of a nothing burger. Interesting data point though. Something going on there. So then we can kind of look at the chart here, figure out, okay, we're consolidating in this chop zone here. Let me turn off my indicators. And so, we can even just draw this. Go see what it's clean on. 65 minute is kind of the cleanest here. So we'll go boom, boom. So I would say on a breakout of this trend line, you have confirmation of what's going on. So you could even, actually you can draw it tighter on the daily. So go here. So breach that prior day high. I would say I would classify that as a breakout of this consolidation here. And it is kind of just a massive bull pennant here. So here's your flagpole, and then you have your pennant here. We can even just draw, I'll go like this. Can even draw it bigger. But yeah, you get the gist of what's going on here. That big bull pennant. So on a breakout of right there, we'll look to head higher. So that's kind of how I would just dig through, just real quick, find stuff on flow. A lot of stuff I'll post up in the flow channel and come back to it later in the week if there's a better opportunity. Let's say a stock, is up 2-3%. Someone's hammering calls that are 10% out of the money. The stock drops back down the next day, 1, 2, 3%. I'll look to the flow from the prior day, figure out exactly, can I get a better entry on this? Is this play still valid based on the chart setup? If it is, then I'll just tail flow for a cheaper entry rather than chase after it the second the order's placed. So sometimes I like to wait and see how things play out unless there's a breakout directly in front of me. And this is right now is kind of the regime where you don't just tail flow. You got to look at the chart and don't worry about the flow necessarily unless the chart looks really good too. So especially on small caps, it's there's some dumb flow going out, and you just gotta make sure that the chart setup is there too. But this looks really good, LMND here. If it breaks above that trend line, we can even set an alert on it if we want. Just right click it, add alert, boom, add the alert. You'll be alerted right away when that trend line breaks. So that's one thing we'd be looking for. So if we want to make it a little bit more broad brush, or dial it in even further, we'll dial it in a little bit more. Go to 10% out of the money only. So someone's selling ASML puts, they might be expecting a move up, and this is just a cheap way of capturing it. Nothing too crazy. And here's a good example of something that actually is a pair trade. So CAR, Avis, I believe. Yep, Avis, Avis budget. A lot of the flow that comes in on CAR has been kind of a pair trade with Carvana, for some strange, odd reason, because I don't think that makes any sense. But that's just something we've been seeing. So we see puts on CAR, and Carvana is another good example of a stock that I was watching, saw some flow come in, let it drop a little bit in price, and I took some of the flow. So we took 320s because I saw these come in last week, and I let them drop a little bit. So I saw 322.50 come in last week, let them drop a little bit. Boom. So this is good repeat hits right here. 423 each is what they paid. And these are down to now 60 cents. And so those I will be looking for a move towards that strike, and we'll see if that plays out. But this is good confluence here. These next week puts on CAR, even though they're fairly small, we can see on CAR here that flagging up here at the highs. There's a clear trend here going on, and if trend is lost, that means that we'll get a nice move down low, and there is a gap to fill here. So another thing you'll be able to see with trend changes, regime changes, those sorts of things, is you'll see a lot of stocks that have, if you want to talk about pair trade, so you see this little gap right here. This is 23rd of June to 24th of June. We can also look to Carvana here. What do you know? There's another gap. This one occurred at a different date though, 27th of June to 30th of June. So same thing, flagging at the highs. This sold down a little bit more, and it's been flagging for a shorter period of time up here. And there is that gap fill waiting down below, just like on CAR. So same thing, we got some gaps waiting below to be retested after a couple day parabolic move and some consolidation. So that's a pattern that we're seeing, and things will move at different rates in comparison to each other. So we know that if CAR makes that move first, Carvana remains to consolidate at the highs, that there's a decent chance if we have some flow to back it, that Carvana will follow that. It might not be exactly at the same time, might be off by a day, a week, whatever. But you'll start to see one by one. My guess is that a lot of tickers are going to be filling gaps, these tiny little gaps on dailies soon. So that's what we'll be watching. For as that starts to happen, you'll see different sectors start to rotate and do the same thing on the sell side. And so we'll look to that for any sort of confluence that's occurring. So that's kind of the gist of how we can pick up on things with, confluence among flow and then looking at chart and seeing the same moves and trends and patterns that are going to be taking place on other stocks. So on the flow side, another one, if you want to just use straight up volume leaders, we can go to volume leaders here. On volume leaders, we get this nice, very nice little dashboard. So we'll go to trades, and we'll go to, I usually just like to sort by rank, so descending. So we got, oh, what do you know there? Number one print on D-Dog. With that flow we saw earlier. So that might be a skewed data point simply because D-Dog was announced that it was being added to the S&P last week. So that I wouldn't necessarily put a ton of weight on. You'll see a lot of major prints when a stock is being added to the S&P. But yeah, D-Dog right here, interesting data point that there was a huge grouping of prints, number 1, 3, and 4. So that's probably just shares being purchased to add to the S&P 500 for exposure. So we're not going to put a ton of weight on that. We'll come over here though. We'll go to bonds, Sezzle. Okay, we can check this one out actually. Why not? Sezzle. So on Sezzle here, we're just going to, this is like the most steady trend I think I've ever seen. Yeah, so starting in, this thing was put on auto bid, do not resuscitate on 8th of May, and it's literally just been pop, 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 auto bid ever since. So seeing that there was a number one print here on today at close, market on close print, definitely something that I would be marking down. So right away, we'll mark this down at 164.13, number one print, 164.13. Mark that down. Go 13. Go purple, and we'll just mark number one print. So on a loss of that number one print there, that's kind of our bearish confirmation. Especially, I usually like these if we get a couple days of overshoot, day or two of overshoot, back up to the highs, but don't break the local highs. Short up there, short it down to here, the number one print, and then if there's a breakdown of that, that's your confirmation. You're on the right side. So we'll even go in here, and what does Sezzle do? So this is another thing we can do to look for confluence. So we'll go down here. We'll see Sezzle engaged in the operation of payment platform that enables bank-to-bank transfer of money between consumers and businesses. Company is founded by Charlie, blah, 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 Minneapolis. So bank-to-bank transfer of money between consumers and businesses. So what other platforms sound familiar that do that same thing? So if this starts to sell off, or doesn't have any clear setup or any indication or anything like that, we can look to, like we mentioned before, we can look to other names in the space. So outside of any news that's taking place with this specific name, which I don't see anything, right off the bat, usually there'll be some little headline here about something crazy that happened, but I don't see anything. So we'll go to PayPal, which is going to be, there we go. So we'll go to PayPal. What setup do we see on PayPal? So PayPal looks like it tried to break out. Now it's back testing here, and the after hours trading is back above that local high here. So right off the bat, we see that clear bull flag breakout, and just, I can eyeball what I think the measured move would be. So let's mark it here. So 65.11 to the top of the flag, 74.10. So that's going to be $8.99. We'll round up, call it 9. So $9. We had the breakout here, back tested it, dropped back down. So we'll just say it broke out down here. So we get $9 here. 79 would be the measured move. We're a little short of it. So if PayPal does not fill above 79, in my opinion, which, what do you know, that also matches up with This is clearly a huge historic level here at 79. That would be really tough to break. And so we'll mark that there. We see some confluence that that measured move on that bull flag is going to go up to the exact historical massive, massive, massive resistance. So that'll be, you can even set an alert right there if it breaks above that and just set it to expire never. If it breaks above that, then it'll be a nice trade up here, up to into the 80s. So we can look to that, see if there's not a very clear bear setup as of right now. Let's pop open the daily. Okay, on the daily, looks like we got bearish engulfing overall here on this candle after a little failure. This is sort of like a spinning top here. So that could be a sign, loss of trend that we've held for 20th of June to 3rd of July, so 2 weeks, loss of a 2-week trend. So there could be some follow through there. Definitely possibility for a short setup, major resistance overhead. This prior imbalance here, we're still holding, but a loss of that could be a big short. So that's on my short radar. So we'll see PayPal there. Interesting. Now we can even let's look at some flow here, shall we? So we'll pop open both these. We'll go to, we'll reduce this so we can catch some more contracts here. We'll go Sezzle, PayPal. We can just do all this with just this data. Okay, so Sezzle here, 165p. These are super spicy, but they came in last week, so that would have been a nice trade at the time. But we are now at the point where these are in profit. So with Sezzle, you can see that there's a number one print here, like we just talked about, and we have put selling on PayPal, tiny, not really anything crazy. We're going to broaden this filter a little bit. We'll go opening trades, turn that off. Okay, so now we got some 145s. This is definitely interesting. This is super interesting to me. So with that number one trade, if we are lucky enough to get a bounce back up here towards the highs, these could be a great play for a reduced cost. So Sezzle, that's one thing we'll be looking for, and that is confirmed on a break below this number one print. Could just go straight there, but I don't know. We will see. There's also clearly a trend here at the lows. We'll ping that. Okay. We can go there. Let's see what's cleanest. Yeah, it's probably a fair one. So, yeah, I would say that's a fair trend right there. Boom. So we can mark that line. Can probably look to that for a rejection, especially on a lower time frame. What do you know? Rejection right there. So if we backtest that, that would be a good put entry spot. And then that's confirmation below 164.13 here. So using dark pools, we found a good short setup here. So this could be a big one. Those 145 puts are spicy. But we also, if you look here, we still have some 180s. Those are also interesting. This is definitely bigger size, but also 28% of it is multi-leg. So not super intriguing. Let's see. Ooh, 135s too. Those might have been closed out today. Can't really tell. We'll have to see tomorrow if open interest increases or drops to see if those were closed out. Might have been closed out though. Let's go 3DTE. Yeah, so it looks like someone bought here. Right now it looks like someone bought here 90 cents and closed out today at $1.25 and $1. So they took profits, possibly. We'll have to see tomorrow with open interest. That's one thing that we'll look for. So look, we already found something that will probably make a big move soon. So definitely note that down. Sezzle right there. You can throw that on a watch list, throw it in chat, do whatever. That'll be a good one to watch for sure. So Sezzle, and then we'll go back. Let's chart another one, shall we? Capital markets, DDOG, Haas, bonds, technology, 5, WNS, FBIN, and preferably just in general with options. I like to keep my Tickers that I'm trading above $100, usually those give the best moves. Anything below 100, you really have to work to get a good return with options. So I usually like to make sure, it's above 100 bucks. The higher the price of the stock, the better, because your options will move more, especially if it's a low IV options contracts and it does get a big move. Those are my best trades. Always come from those. Like Spotify was a great example. Those went 70x. The puts we took on Spotify after we saw number one print, number two print, number three print, number four print come in at the highs. Major sell-off in a couple days, in 3 days, and those puts went 70x because they were so cheap because the thing just consolidates all the time and doesn't move much. So those are going to be your best plays when you start to see those take shape. So that's kind of what we'll be looking for. Let's see if there's anything really appealing here that stands out. FS D-Dog. Let's see. CRDO. And yeah, if you guys have any questions while I'm going through any of this stuff, feel free to just drop them in the chat for the live stream, and I'll be sure to get to them. So CRDO, interesting. Let's pop this open. Let's even go 10 trades. We'll go last year. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, that's fascinating. That's got some room. CRDO. Number one print sitting at A6851. CRDO. Go here. What does the daily look like? Parabolic. Okay. So this thing has got, let's even zoom in a little bit more. Last week, that looks like they're just selling all the way up for the last week. Let's go last 30 days. So we can see, okay, yeah, that's huge distribution is what it appears to be. Over the past 2 week period. So that's another thing about these distribution cycles that occur is that they can happen over 2 weeks straight. So just because you see a bunch of prints coming in doesn't mean that it's going to happen the next day, the day after, or whatever. But this is certainly intriguing at 93.40 and 93.50. This is going to be definitely the largest price level. So yeah, we'll check that out. 93, what was it? 93.40, 93.50. So we're gonna mark price range here. Here you go. 93.40, 93.50. Boom. Rough, doesn't have to be exact for now. And that's what we're going to look for. That's where all those prints are taking place. So on a lower time frame, got somewhat of an inverse head and shoulders here. But on a higher time frame, it looks like it's about to roll over. So we see a theme here that there's a lot of different tickers that look like they're about to roll over. So after a parabolic run, which usually is a signal that you should be cautious in any longs that you're in. But CRDO looks like an interesting one for sure. We'll keep that marked down. Think about that, and it's got a lot of room because the next level is going to be that number one print level. There's also number 3 here. So this is going to be from June 9th, 2025. Yeah, so it's got a lot of room to pull back. We'd be looking to about 71 bucks probably is where I would put a level on our pullback target here. So we don't even need a specific pattern that we're watching for. Now we know that we're looking for a pullback back to this level here. Could take a while, so we might want to just buy some time. But yeah, that's what we'll be looking for. So we'll go number 1, number 3, print spots. Boom. Okay. And then we go distribution level. Go make that purple. Coordinates 73.40, 73.50. Boom. So this is our distribution level here. we'll be watching that right there. And a break below that, especially, I mean, right away we can just draw trend line here. We'll go hourly. So we'll look for a break. We can even set an alert for this as well. So we'll look for a break of this trend line here. Yeah, it's not super clean. Let's go. What's a 65 look like? Yeah, it's a little better. So we'll go 65 minute here, draw array, boom, boom. So break down this trend line, and we can even set an alert if it opens below that, you know, get some longer dated puts. That's what we'll be looking for, is that sort of move. So keep that in mind. Big distribution level, and that will be one of our trade ideas to watch. So let's even check our flow here. We'll go CRDO. Let's just reset all these. CRDO. Alright, let's see what we got with size. A single leg. Alright, so looks like we got some longer dated put selling. Interesting. We'll go 30. Interesting. So a lot of call buying today, especially with those, that number one print. We got an 85 seller. That's interesting. Okay, so someone doesn't expect this to go below 85 before next OPEX. So, well, actually, that might just be a closeout because these have a ton of open interest. So, yeah, interesting. So we'll look to 85 here. Someone's selling puts in case it dips. If that does not dip, and this does, it has a little bit of an inverse head and shoulders look here. The measured move, if this makes a breakout over 96 here with that inverse head and shoulders, we'd be looking for a measured move of 96 to 84, so 12, so $108 would be the target on that, which this thing's above all-time high, so doesn't really have anything other than a fib extension that we can draw. So that would be another one to look at. So that's kind of just the gist of how we would look for that on the front of the dark pool side of things. Now that we've got the flow and the dark pool out of the way and used each other for confirmation. So anyone have any good questions for me that they want me to go over?